Hi, my name is Stephen Nolan, Managing Director of the UN-convened Financial Centres for Sustainability. In addition, for this week only, I'm also Chairman of Ireland's 4th Climate Finance Week. So far across the week, there have been over 6 million social media impressions and several thousand have also virtually attended the sessions, which is super. Today, supported by the Sustainable Finance SkillNet, our team is talent and innovation. And within this context, the launch earlier this week of Ireland's first National Sustainable Finance Roadmap importantly has talent development at the heart of this document. Indeed, it is Pillar 1. This roadmap was co-developed by Sustainable Finance Ireland, SkillNet Ireland and the UN-convened Financial Centres for Sustainability. With many on the panel today with me involved in its development, it is a great framework to guide Irish activities in the space between now and 2025. So I'm really excited about today's panel, which is focused on our USP, talent development. We've got a super panel from around, not just within Ireland, but also around the world from Canada. I want to welcome everybody. I've got Yvonne from AIB, we've got Tracy from SkillNet Ireland, we've got Emer from Institute of Bankers, we have Joe from Bank New York Mellon, Sandra from Irish Life Investment Managers, and all the way from Toronto, the head of Toronto Finance International, Jennifer Reynolds. Welcome everybody, it's great to see you all. Joe, it's obviously sunny where you are, but it's great to have you all with us today. Yvonne, if I can hand over you to open the session, please.
Great, thank you, Stephen. So I'd like to welcome you all today to our session discussing Ireland's Sustainable Finance USP, our talent base. SkillNet Ireland is a business support agency of the Government of Ireland, and SkillNet Ireland is funded from the National Training Fund through the Department of Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science. Its mandate is to advance the competitiveness, productivity and innovation of Irish businesses through enterprise-led talent development. And this is done through approximately 70 SkillNet business networks, and the Sustainable Finance SkillNet is one of those. So we support the Irish financial sector to upskill in sustainable finance through grant funding and organising training opportunities. In 2020, the Sustainable Finance SkillNet supported over 1,000 employees in 361 organisations to upskill in sustainable finance, with improved figures expected this year. I would like to acknowledge the incredible work of Raheem O'Neill in leading the work in the Sustainable Finance SkillNet under the stewardship of Stephen Nolan. The highlight so far of 2021 was the funding and development of the National Sustainable Finance Roadmap and its supporting studies, including a deeper dive into sustainable finance skills. The skills report mapped 47 different roles in the financial services sector to specific sustainable finance drivers and upskilling needs, and further identified 52 existing relevant courses. The report will be available to download from sustainablefinance.ie. So Stephen has introduced the panel, so I'm going to hand back to Stephen to moderate the session. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. And Yvonne, not only is she Chief Sustainability Officer with Ireland's largest bank, AIB, she's also good enough to be the chairperson of the Sustainable Finance SkillNet, and I'm very proud to sit on that committee and obviously guide the work of Raheem, as you mentioned, the pair of us. So as I said, we've got a world-class panel, and yesterday we also had a panel which Jennifer was also involved in, of financial centres around the world. They were also discussing the role of financial centres as we build towards COP, and then realising what may come out of COP26. And it was amazing how long of the hour discussion we spent on the skills agenda. And I don't think that Dublin is alone, and maybe Jennifer will echo this later on, but the skills challenge is a challenge that every financial centre is facing around the world in terms of sustainable finance. And from an Irish perspective on the Sustainable Finance Skillnet, Yvonne, Ireland seems to be slightly ahead, and with the support of Skillnet Ireland, Tracy, in actually developing a specific platform which is supporting, as you noted, the thousands of people in Ireland in terms of financial services upskilling. So in terms of moving forward, we've got three kind of key sections to today's discussion. One is a landscape overview. The second is a deeper dive, and maybe around those 47 different roles. And then the impact. What impact is all this talent development actually having on developing products and services, and therefore mobilising new capital in support of the SDGs. So maybe, Emer, if I can turn to you from the Institute of Bankers, to maybe get us going with it, with more so kind of the landscape view and what you're seeing within the Institute, please, Emer.
Sure, no problem. So first of all, apologies, I do have a slight cold. So if you notice a change in my voice, it is me trying to control a cough. And thank you, Stephen, for the invitation today, and congratulations to you, Raheem, and Yvonne, and the rest of the team on the document, and indeed all of the work in the SkillNet so far. It's really, really excellent and provides a real umbrella for all providers in the sector to kind of point towards a North Star together. So thank you very much, and I hope you're all very proud of the work as well. So firstly, before I start, I suppose I've worked alongside the financial services sector in education and training for a many number of years now, probably more than I'd care to share at this point publicly anyway. And I don't think I've ever seen such an exciting time for the sector. So when you see the breadth of the research and the work that goes into the skills gap report, it can be slightly daunting. It can seem like a lot, but actually the opportunity is huge, you know. And for the first time, I can also see a huge collection, both from a corporate perspective and also from an individual perspective, of a huge want. So people want to upskill in this area. People really, it's connecting for the first time in a long time. It's connecting people's individual purpose with their organization's values, and indeed with the societal obligations that we have to try to save the destruction to the planet as well. So it's a really exciting time, and certainly one in, as I said, the years that I'm not disclosing, that I've seen in a long time. So what I might do in an effort, conscious of the range of speakers that are there, and I'm going to try to be as succinct as possible with it, I might start by looking firstly at the demand side, as in what kind of topics and themes that we're seeing, and certainly that have been captured within the skills report as well, and then look at the supply side, because that's quite interesting in terms of what the providers are doing and how we in IOB are changing, but also how I can see the sector changing as well. So first of all, and the roadmap that you referenced earlier on, Stephen, the overall sustainable finance roadmap referenced, and the research that went into it referenced the UN baseline assessment methodology, which was used across the different member states. And I think that's a really important place to start, actually, because it's grounded in research, which as a quasi academic is really important to me, but also it serves as a useful reminder. And I think from my perspective anyway, I think what that top challenge showed in the ESG space is data and data skills. And in particularly when you look at data quality and data availability. And what's particularly interesting about that is that when you look at the sector, even if one can outside ESG, data is a challenge everywhere. So even if you're not specifically looking at ESG data, then those skills are in high demand. So I think we're going to see a continuation of the need and the want and the demand for those data skills. And I think it would also be remiss not to note as well that I think the sector, whilst certainly needs to consider its strategy in terms of upskilling from a data perspective, also needs a little bit of guidance. So I think if we can, as a collective and certainly from a directive perspective, get some understanding on what future mandatory reporting standards might look like or should play, I think it'll help us to form a response to that as well. So data for sure, I think is the biggest hot topic, I suppose. But then when we're looking at the other ones, and I think we'll discuss that later on in terms of the legislative drivers in general. But there will continue to be a big focus on the EU taxonomy and in general other legislative drivers connected to that, but not fully related, but connected. Risk management will absolutely continue to be a big driver as well, and with particular focus on climate risk management and transition risk as well. So I'll talk in a minute about the supply side and the collaboration that's needed within within the I suppose the education and training providers, absolutely. But I think what the skills will the skills increase, or sorry, the talent demand will suggest for sure is that there's a need for greater interdisciplinary teams. And if we go back to the earlier point of data, it's going to be very difficult to analyze, and to even more challenging is to model unknown models. We've seen it a little bit in terms of a global pandemic that has shut down a large part of the world's economy for a large period of time, that there are no models for that. So it's going to be very difficult to be able to accurately to model. So, and to do it, and the best chance of being able to do it, we're going to see greater interdisciplinary teams there. And I know in the UN report as well, there was a mention of natural science professionals, and for sure that will become a greater skill demand for the sector as well. But I would hope as well to see a greater demand for social science professionals too, because if we look at the sector and we look at ESG, we know that E is firmly coming up. The environmental stuff is firmly coming up the agenda. Governance always was and has been for a long time. So there is you can there is an argument to say that you can never have too much focus on governance, but there has been a lot of focus on governance. But what I don't see, and what I would like to see more of, I suppose, is that greater focus on societal impact. Again, when we're looking at the broader ESG range, we know that the collective purpose, the societal purpose, the move from shareholder to stakeholder model is really important. But I think I'd like to see a little bit more social science in the mix as well. Now, for those of you who know me, my background is also social science, so that could be a little bit of bias talking there, but I'll happily take a challenge there if needed. So I suppose that's the demand side. And then when I look at the supply side, so in terms of the providers, I mean, the excellent report does comment and does suggest, the research in it does suggest that the gap and the challenge will be in having adequate supply for the want, both from a corporate and from an individual perspective. So education, basically education and training, depending on how you want to categorize it, needs to be to do better and needs to think differently as well. And I think we're beginning as a sector, if I can be so bold as to speak for the entire education sector, we're beginning to see shifts there. So I think what we'll see a greater degree of over the coming years, and hopefully in the short term, so not too medium term either, is greater collaboration, particularly from professional bodies. I mean, if you look at the IOB model, for example, that's what we try to do. So we work with other bodies, for example, globally, for example, Promea and the Chartered Institute in Scotland, which is the primary body for the UK, and also within Ireland as well, with bodies like the Chartered Accountants. So I think that the only way that we'll meet the demand that the sector so badly needs from us is by greater collaboration and openness there as well. I think what's also, and partly related to that as well, I think it's critical that we that we actively, as education providers, seek to widen the talent pool of deliverers in the field. you can begin to see it already, where it's almost the same names that are coming up there and there again, which, ironically also isn't sustainable. So I think we have an obligation to make sure that as we are delivering programs, that we are widening that number and the talent that is there. I think that's important for a couple of reasons. One, as I mentioned, from the sustainability area for sure, but also actually in terms of the diversity of thought. So it's really important that as all of our knowledges expand, that we really ensure that those who are delivering are actually incredibly both well versed from a knowledge and content perspective, but actually open and able to see different angles rather than just the straight angle down. So I think that's very important as well. I think hopefully as well, much greater focus will be put on pipeline. So pipeline of graduates. Like I think what I've spoken about thus far has been very much focused on kind of, those who are already, so students who are already working in sector. And the obligation that's on us and other professional bodies to be able to meet that demand. But also when you think about the pipeline of graduates, of those who are coming out of more traditional universities, it's really important that ESG is embedded in it. I know through our work leading up to the roadmap as well, it was observed that can be a challenge, because it can take a long time for some more traditional universities to change curricula. But I think it's really, really important that the thousands of business and commerce and graduates, at the very least, before you look at other disciplines, are coming out with this baseline knowledge as well. I think that will make a significant difference as well. So I think we will see that. I know that the universities, and particularly those that are named within the roadmap, the universities and the TUDs are committed to the agenda as well. So it'd be great to see that that happen into account as well. I think another thing to consider as well, and don't worry, Stephen, I'm coming to a conclusion fairly soon. But I think one thing to consider as well are the types of learning, right? So we are often very focused, and they are really important and serve a purpose of the big, year-long, 2-year-long degrees, partial degrees or master programs, incredibly important and will continue to serve a function. But I think based on the demand and based on the overwhelming need, I think we're going to see a greater uptick in shorter skills certificates. So they can be, depending on the institution's design choice, anything up to 12 weeks in duration, where literally you get a deep dive in whatever the content area or the knowledge area that you need. So it's not necessarily be the full accredited university program, but it is giving you the knowledge that you need and when you need it. And I think that, and the asynchronous nature of it, of that need, is something that we'll see. Or at least I hope that we'll see as well. So again, I'll come back to my point at the start, where it might seem like a lot. And, I've spoken probably about 3 or 4 minutes there about all of the things that are happening, and I've only touched on a number of them. But I think, again, for me, it's really exciting. The will is there. But actually, the will is necessary. So I won't restate the IPCC recent report. I think we're all probably familiar enough with it as well. What I can also see from a corporate perspective is that people aren't looking at it from, improved returns or anything like that. Although that is also, a good benefit to it. But actually, there is a collective will and excitement about actually making a difference there. So hopefully, Stephen, I'll pass back to you now. Hopefully, I didn't go over too much, and hopefully gave the audience a flavour of what we're seeing from both the demand and the supply side as well.
Emer, that was fantastic. That was a tour de force, being honest with you. And I think only somebody in your position within the Institute of Bankers and what you see on a daily basis could have actually done that and done it so well. And I'll try and summarize, data challenge again. We're seeing that within FC First across every financial centre, interdisciplinary teams, of course, S in ESG. We're seeing the Commission really begin to focus in and perhaps, already talking about a social taxonomy. So I completely agree with you on that. We need to widen that pool of delivers. I think, again, part of the challenge to sustainable finance Skinnet is actually finding people with the skill base to actually deliver the course. I think what one of the challenges we're seeing there. Pipeline of graduates, of course, get that. And the types of learning, and this is even on a personal level. Even myself, I'm trying to find shorter courses, you said maybe 12 weeks or whatever it may be. So I can see that in my group as well. So really, really good tour de force, really echoes with everything that the Sustainable Finance Skillnet is seeing with Yvonne and Raheem, and also what I'm seeing in terms of UNFC4S. Tracy, we've heard the mention of Skillnet Ireland a lot during these few minutes.
Yeah.
And, Skillnet Ireland is a catalyst for a lot of things in general in terms of talent development here in Ireland. You had a great week in the budget. Again, the government recognised how important you are and how important the work you do is to upskill, as I said, across industry in Ireland. We also have Paul Healy, your Chief Executive, your colleague here with us earlier on this week, launching the roadmap with Achim Steiner, the UNDP. And he used this great term, scaffolding. Sustainable finance is a scaffolding around the real economy. But just while I have you here, can you just give us a bit more detail on what Skillnet Ireland is and why you've gone so large into the climate agenda and within that sustainable finance?
Okay, thank you, Stephen. It's great to be here, and like Yvonne, I just would like to congratulate you on the roadmap, which is fantastic. Skillnet Ireland is the national talent agency, and the work we do is working directly with enterprise across a wide range of sectors, sustainable finance being the key one we're talking about today. Really what we do is work in partnership with businesses, groups of businesses, industry bodies, because we feel that the industry bodies and companies themselves are best placed to really identify, what are the emerging business needs, business challenges, the immediate talent development needs, but also long-term talent development needs. And what we think is so fantastic here about the roadmap and the reason we worked with you on it was, what this is enabling you to do then is to work with a wide range of partners, the government, ourselves, Skillnet Ireland, industry, companies, all the academic institutions, the Institute of Bankers, to actually examine what exactly will we do, what are the talent needs. So what we can do is provide the support and the framework to bring all these partners together, because we're effectively built on collaboration and flexibility. So what we are very, very pleased with to see was the extent of the work that went into the roadmap, by all the industry bodies working together, the 50 companies, the 8 different working groups, the research you did, the I suppose the international best practice, the benchmarking you did, ultimately to build this roadmap. And for us, I suppose it's very pleasing to see that the first pillar is talent, because we could see that talent is critical to us, Ireland reaching its goals, but also Ireland becoming that international centre for sustainable finance. I think we can become that leader, ultimately with talent. So what Skillnet Ireland can do is partner with you as we've done for the last 10 years, and we're very pleased with all the new development programmes you've developed, but also this research. And I think, like we were saying earlier, there's so many different areas that we can build that talent, whether it's in developing new innovative sustainable finance products, data analysis, but also I think maybe capitalising on emerging technologies, like blockchain or artificial intelligence. And what I think would be great is that the partnership, as you know, our partnership model enables Sustainable Finance Skillnet to work with some of our other Skillnets, where there's convergence or leverage the knowledge maybe of our technology networks, or, the work that you're already doing with the IFS Skillnet and the compliance programs. So I think what we can do then perhaps is help develop that framework for collaboration and developing new programs, whether they are short programs or accredited longer term masters or postgraduate programs, but really whatever is best suited. It could be, I think that's one of the other benefits of working with us in Skillnet Ireland, and also in building the expertise of the training community, if you like, and building more experts, because one thing we have to do, and we've seen this both in the sustainable finance, but also the work that we're doing with other parts of sustainability. So there's a dearth or a lack of experts who can actually support and develop businesses in whether it's in energy efficiencies or green technologies. There's also they're also facing this area. And I know one of the things we could do together, I think, is build that group of experts, both nationally and internationally. Ultimately, I think that the roadmap provides that framework or scaffolding, as you mentioned earlier, that will, in time, help Ireland become that leading expert, and I think it will be globally recognised. You know what I mean? And even be, sometimes we can be the envy of the world. We're often recognised, this model that we have in both your sector and other sectors, as being quite innovative. The partnership, really, I suppose, between enterprise and the government. So,
and I think, Tracy, if we look at the figures, nearly 3,000 Irish located finance professionals since last year, supported by the Sustainable Finance Skill Net. It's just staggering. But it also goes back to Emer's point. The demand now is picking up. And let's be very clear, and there is the roadmap itself, which is fantastic, but also walking the walk by putting those thousands of people through, some of them here in AIB, Yvonne, right? Putting through those courses. They wouldn't exist without Skill in Ireland support. And I think, I'm going to come to Emer now, because the key question is, there wasn't a lot of content either. And so we actually had to kind of commission the development of content. And Emer, just before I get into the rest of the panel there, I saw a question here come in from somebody just asking about understanding the skill needs yet, or are candidates themselves fully aware of what they need? The ESG agenda is moving so fast. It's like a regulatory tsunami. And you're sitting there as a company or as an individual going, well, where do I start? Is this what you're seeing when you talk to people, or is there a lot of clarity thought here?
Absolutely. So I suppose, do candidates know? I would say no. What I would say also is, unless you're in a very well-defined, job, family, or career path, that's often the case. So I'll talk a little bit about a little pet peeve I have, which is in general around guidance counselling or career guidance in a second. But what I would say is, typically, no, there is a lack of not willingness, but definitely understanding from an individual perspective about where to go, right? So what I would say is, and it's something that I have observed a change in over the past year or so, is that I would say what I know from our corporates, and in particular I'd like to compliment Yvonne and her team on it, is that corporates are getting very, very, very strong now at providing that information. So providing a little bit of a stepping stone in terms of, this is where you could consider going. So, and that's not easy to do. So, Yvonne and the team, again, very well done on that. But what I would say is that there is a huge obligation on the provider to do that, and I'm holding up the mirror again to the education and training sector in terms of providing that, But like for IOB as well, personalised learning is really, really, really important. There's no point for somebody, particularly that somebody who's working full time in a demanding job with an equally demanding personal life, to undertake a program that is not going to be beneficial for them. So it's really important that those who have the want and the ability in terms of time, because everybody has the ability to learn, but those who have the want and have the time and space to be able to commit to further learning, it's really important that that's right for them, So, from an IOB perspective, there's kind of two ways that we approach that. One is from a personalized learning perspective, and if we use technology as well. So earlier this year we launched a personalized learning diagnostic tool called IOB Learn, which basically, depending on your interest, depending on your career aspirations, guides you to what the appropriate learning is for you. And that's both in terms of, big, meaty programs, but also smaller pieces of learning, and right down to curated articles, because what I often think is, all I need is somebody for 20 minutes on a bus with their phone in their hands to be able to absorb a small piece of content and to be able to make a difference in their role the next day with that. So there's a huge obligation on the sector to help that guidance, to help people to understand where they can best channel their energy. But also, it's really important that we as providers work closely with the sector. I know when we were designing our own program, which also thankfully got the support of Sustainable Finance SkillNet as well. But when we were designing our program, it's hand, and with all of our programs, it's hand in hand with the corporates, because we'll all have different views. So from a provider perspective, one that works with 34,000 members across the sector, we'll have a very broad view. But corporates will have a very narrow and very, often very regulated view as well. When you design a program like that, be it again a big program or small program, when you design like that, you won't go too far wrong. So sorry, that was a very long answer, and don't worry, Stephen, I won't start talking about the guidance counsellor I had when I was 16 and doing my leaving cert, but I'll leave it at that. But hopefully that answers the question.
Well, I actually think that would be a fascinating story. But thank you, Emer, because you're really putting the flavour in terms of the practitioner, the provider, the different challenges you go through. And actually, we kind of ended there in the line about corporate. So we've got two leading corporate players on the line with us. We've got Sandra from Ilum, and we've got Joe from Bank New York Mellon. Sandra, can I actually start with you first? That question was a very broad question. Do we know what we want ourselves? And as Emer just said, well, the corporates are getting much stronger at that. But we had Patrick Burke earlier on during the week, and I can remember 4 or 5 years ago, Patrick looking at me nearly growling and going, "Stephen, are you sure?" And I'm like, "Yes, Patrick, come on," right? But you've never done a transaction in your life, Stephen. I'm like, "Come on, Patrick, we can do this." And you've led on that journey for Ilum, and you've really leveraged off the Sustainable Finance SkillNet. But at the beginning of that journey as a corporate, if I can use the phrase that Emer said, how challenging was that for you? And then how did you overcome that hump to get to where you are now in this space?
I think it was hugely challenging. So I suppose from a strategy perspective, probably the easiest thing for us to do as a management team or as a leadership team was understand where we wanted to go. So we really wanted to bring and have to bring responsible investment both throughout our business, but actually really to the core of what we do. And so that was a very key strategic decision that we made some time ago. But I suppose from a strategy execution perspective, I think this is probably one of the most extensive and far-reaching programs of activity that I personally have ever worked on in my working career. It impacts all teams, albeit to different degrees, but it also requires all teams to work together to play a part in terms of its delivery. And I could think the challenges and the context in which we're working is so important, because the first is that, I suppose from a leadership perspective, we knew that we were going to have to make strong decisions. They had to be focused and they had to be impactful. But we were working in an industry where the pace of evolution of the industry was changing. It's a very fast evolving space. It shows no sign of slowing down, whether that's on the regulatory side, whether it's on the data side, or whether it's on the technical understanding of sustainability as an investment issue or as a macro global issue. And I suppose the other aspect is there's no definitive end state. So we're working in with moving, evolving targets. So I suppose reiterating a lot of the points that you're talking about, in that type of environment and with that type of strategy, really talent and the upskilling of your teams is going to be the key determining factor of success. And I think that's something that we called very early in our own journey. And I suppose within that space, we sought to deploy that in two ways. One was, I suppose, and this was, I'm echoing back to your Deloitte skills gap report that you published some years ago, but there is need for specialist ESG expertise or sustainability understanding in businesses. This is a very new concept. They are forward-looking macro themes that are going to play out in very different ways. And we did need to bring in specialist expertise and continue to need to build out that specialist expertise within our business. But alongside that, and so importantly, was the upskilling of our existing teams. This strategy could not be deployed with a tight, focused group of individuals. It's an all-encompassing organizational change that we are embarking on, have been on for some time, and continue to be on, and require all of our people really play their part. So when I think about starting to work with yourselves, and I think back to conversations we would have had in 2019, and I think yourself and Emer identified it, there really was no formal training in place at that stage. And there was a lot of information about broad sustainability concepts, but as they related to our business and specifically the nuances of an asset management business or a corporate, or in fact the roles of our people within the context of that business, and there was really an absence of that. So I suppose one of our initial conversations was, how can we work together to co-create, develop a specific training course that really brings a foundational knowledge to not only our directors and senior leadership team, but actually the entire business about the importance of this agenda, what's happening in terms of the market, the regulatory landscape, and what decisions we have to make as a business. So that was really our first entry point into SkillNet Ireland with yourselves, and working with yourself and Raheem and actually Emer in the Institute of Banking, was developing that foundational course, which we rolled out to all of our staff. Since then, we've extended that course beyond actually our own business, and we've extended it into our client base, into our partner base. So educating the trustees of pension schemes, who are the asset owners, having to make decisions about where they deploy their investments, but also into the financial advisor market, and supporting the retail brokers in making decisions around the financial products that they themselves choose for their customers. And I suppose supplementing that, we're engaging very heavily in specialist training. So working on very functional, very relevant and very timely specialist training within, for example, the compliance departments, the investment risk departments, as well as the customer relations, client relationship management teams, and the fund management teams. And I suppose increasingly what we are now finding, as the industry has evolved, and as Emer said, as education providers have evolved their own offerings, we're looking now to secure accreditation and roll out a qualification, formal qualifications to our staff that are relevant to their specific areas of expertise. But we're working with UCD, the Institute of Bankers, the CFA, to roll out dedicated courses to our teams. And I suppose all of that has been, deployed successfully through our business with top-down leadership support, but also important engagement with yourselves in terms of, doing the market scanning, understanding the courses that are there, but also, and I really do mean this, your willingness to engage in terms of understanding the specific needs of our business and supporting us in designing courses and delivering courses that do meet that specific need. And I suppose ultimately, what is this about? Well, it's about having an impact. So what we have done over the last 3 years has been to effectively roll our responsible investment capabilities through a proprietary shelf. We have 35 billion now of assets that have converted to have responsible investment or sustainability brought through the core. We've materially reduced the carbon intensity of that portfolio in a region of about 32% versus the equivalent market cap. And I think really, really importantly for me is we have upskilled. We have about 100% of our staff fully accredited now with foundational courses. We're seeing a voluntary uptake within teams of about 85% in terms of new qualifications. And I think what's really important for us is we have created a momentum and an energy within our business, which has enabled us to innovate, to lead in terms of decision making, to convert existing traditional mandates over to more responsible versions of those mandates, but also to lead in terms of our people being energized by this agenda. I pick up on what Emer said. I've never worked in a strategy where our people have been so motivated, driven, and compelled to contribute to this strategy for our business. And I do agree with what Emer said. It's about connecting personal values with an organizational value, with an impact in terms of that broader environment. And certainly I think in terms of successful deployment of sustainability across any business, a corporate, an asset manager, any business, it's about having your people, the talent behind it, motivated and leading the charge. And I really do believe that the training and skills agenda has been so foundational to enabling that within our own business.
Great. And thank you for that, Sandra. I think that's a great soundbite for the roadmap, Tracy, in terms of foundational, hence the reason why it's pillar one in the roadmap. And I know if Raheem was here, I'd imagine he'd take full credit for that 35 billion that Sandra has just mentioned. But I'll take it on his behalf.
Yeah.
But I know, all joking aside, I just think it's fantastic, Sandra, what you have done. And Joe, you know, Irish, but a global business leader in terms of Bank New York Mellon. Where are you as a firm in this agenda, please, within the Irish operation, Joe?
So it's an interesting start point, Stephen, and I apologise for the strength of the ring light that's in the sky outside my window. You know, I think we're no different to very many firms operating in Ireland today in a financial services environment, in that we're on a journey, and it's a journey of learning and understanding and education. And it's difficult to know whether any firm is ahead or is lagging an industry in general. And to that end, working with Financial Services Ireland, we really, about a year ago, started to think about the challenge that was being faced by firms operating from Ireland and contributing globally in terms of their ESG readiness. And what we thought we could do collectively was create the role of something that we labeled a Chief Sustainability Officer, and house that sort of role in Ireland, and then export knowledge from here that might attach to that sort of a role. And we went so far as to canvass some of the 155 firms that are operating in a financial services arena today and members of Financial Services Ireland, and to talk about the role and what it might bring. And we envisaged a role that would be a basic role, and then a core role, and then an advanced role. And we started to create work programs of education and learning that might go to support a role. And then we stopped, and we stopped because what hit us was what was hitting so many firms that operate globally, and that was a real need to do something and to do something with urgency because SFDR was landing. And everyone on the panel here knows that FSDR came into force on the 10th of March this year with level 1 recommendations, and level 2 come in from January 2022. And we started to look, a working group within Financial Services Ireland started to look at what that sort of challenge would bring. And I'm sure across many financial services firms operating in Ireland, the exact same thought processes were taking place. What do we have to do to be compliant? How do we have to change to be compliant? What are we going to have to report on to be compliant? And you know, you think everyone would have been a little bit more ready for this, given that the task force on climate-related financial disclosure was formed by the Financial Stability Board in 2015. But you know, as is typically the way, until something is staring you directly in the face, you don't really get ready for it. So with that focus on what we need to do now, we started to think about, well, who needs to be tooled up, and what sort of learning and educational support do they need? And timed for with this panel commencing, Stephen, so about 45 minutes ago, I believe we'll have made a press release announcing the world's first course in compliance around sustainable finance, which will be made available to compliance professionals in Ireland. That course is as a result of collaboration between IFS SkillsNet and the Sustainable Finance SkillsNet and the Association of Compliance Officers in Ireland, which is a professional body here representing over 3,200 compliance professionals. And what it's going to do is it's recognizing the importance of a role of a compliance officer into the future, and it's going to equip that cohort of compliance professionals with the skills that they're going to need into the future to ensure and assist the firms that they work for and serve to be compliant around all forms and frames of disclosures that will have to happen. And government funding is supporting that, and it's costing a couple of €100,000 to get it up and running and off the ground, but it's an example of doing something real to meet a real need. And I think that's the sort of area that, back to your original question, that's the sort of area where firms are today. They're facing a real and pressing need, and it's time now to do things to meet those needs head on. And the roadmap announced earlier in the week, it cleverly identifies these needs and helps people organize themselves around meeting those needs head on. And a lot of the conversation from our previous panelists also spoke to those emerging needs and meeting them head on with training and preparing a cohort of a workforce for the future skills that are going to be needed for a fastly changing environment and an exciting environment that we're all heading into, where sustainability has become much more prominent and to the fore, and appropriately so.
Thank you, Joe. And as you said, an exciting and a fastly changing environment. And you're right, there's a reason why this is at the fore, and that's rightly so. And I think, Tracy, I think what Joe did there as well was cleverly merged out of the roadmap, Pillar 1, which is talent development, and Pillar 2, which is industry readiness.
Yeah.
And I think the compliance course co-developed, or to be co-developed by the IFS, SkillNet, and Sustainable Finance SkillNet really is a great example. Roadmap only launched a few days ago, kind of Blue Peter style. This one we prepared earlier, but it is a great example of actually how we merged them. And as Joe said, it's a few $100,000. It's just under €200,000. And Tracy, that would not have happened without the support of SkillNet Ireland. So.
Yeah, and it's meeting, one of the actions in Ireland for Finance. And I think what we recognised was the need for that partnership to develop that programme, and really, I suppose, equipping people with the right skills, because you need that. Yeah.
And if I can, I'm going to jump over to Toronto now. And Jennifer's been very patient there, and it's early in her morning. Jennifer, you've heard a lot about Ireland there, and I know you were good enough to be in Ireland a few years ago, pre-COVID. And we had a dinner in the Canadian Embassy, which was great, and that's a long time ago, and I haven't seen you in the last 2 years in person, but obviously as the co-chair of FC4S, but what you've heard here today, how is it resonating in Canada? And maybe can you tell us a little bit about how Sustainable Finance Ireland, through FC4S, is actually helping you in what you're trying to do in Toronto, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Stephen. It's actually been a really interesting conversation, because I think, from two seats that I sit in, number one as the co-chair of FC4S, we certainly have seen this discussion around skills really evolve very, very quickly. Each financial center is in a very different place, but everybody's dealing with this problem, no matter where they are in the spectrum of the development of sustainable finance capacity within their market. And in the Canadian context, it's interesting because the momentum here over the last 24 months has been unbelievable, but driven primarily by the private sector here. So a little bit different than what we've seen in the EU, but a recognition that this is where we're going globally. We need to move quickly. And so we've seen the private sector step up, make all kinds of announcements around net zero, around commitments to financing various projects and initiatives within Canada and outside of our borders as well. And so, of course, that brings on the discussion of talent. So we're having the exact same discussion around talent and sustainable finance in Canada that you obviously have been having in Ireland for quite some time. So there is no shortage of demand, that is for sure, but it is a supply issue. In Toronto, we actually have a very dense proportion of people working in financial services sector, even higher than New York or London. So a great pool of talent. But do they have the skills we need for the future? Those skills in sustainable finance, and what are those? So, as you know, Stephen, we've been working with FC4S and Deloitte, doing a study right now as we speak on what is the talent pool in Canada for sustainable finance? What are the skills of the future? What do we need? What is that demand piece, exactly as we were talking about earlier in this panel? And then how are we going to supply that? And so many of the themes that were mentioned today, exactly the same in the Canadian context too, in terms of the types of skills that are required. In our case, it's how do we really, as quickly as we can, gear up to provide those skills within our own financial services talent pool. And so, that'll happen in a couple of different ways. We really are seeing that the micro-credential is probably going to be a very effective way of meeting that skills gap. We don't need whole new degrees necessarily, but deep dives into certain areas will be very effective in upskilling our existing workforce. So that'll be a critical piece. Our universities are moving very quickly around integrating sustainable finance into their core business programs, because it should be part of the core business programs, and more integrated into all different streams within universities. So that is starting to happen. What we're trying to do with this study that we're doing is accelerate that. Let's give the playbook out to people. Let's tell people what's needed, and then work with all the different folks within our market to make that happen, whether it's the CFAs of the world, the accounting bodies, the different post-secondary institutions. How are we going to make this and accelerate this as quickly as we can? So, many of the same trends. The one last thing I would mention, though, is what we're seeing within our big financial institutions, and this was touched on earlier, is, we used to see ESG live within this silo, and everyone very quickly has realized that can't happen. We actually have to, everyone, for instance, within our capital markets groups has to get up to speed on this. So this upskilling piece of our existing workforce across a very broad proportion of our pool of talent is going to need to happen. And so that recognition is there, and that is starting to happen as well.
Great. And thank you for that, Jennifer. And Tracy, just for your interest, because you were involved, if I remember correctly, in 2019 in the launch of the Irish Sustainable Finance Skills Deep Dive, which Deloitte did. When Jennifer there and Raheem is also involved, it's actually Deloitte Ireland and Deloitte Canada are collaborating with Toronto to undertake this piece of work. And I think it's also important to note that Toronto is the second largest financial centre in North America. It will have a significant impact in terms of the talent pool. Jennifer, just stay with you for more moments, if I may. We're fortunate enough in my role that you are the co-chair of FC4S, and you have that global perspective, 39 financial centres, and we're all meeting together, thankfully and hopefully in person next January. COP26 is coming up. That was our discussion yesterday. What is the role of financial centres, as we build towards COP, but more so about realising the ambitions that we hope to achieve at COP? Where do you see that, please, Jennifer?
I think there's a huge responsibility that's incumbent upon financial centers to accelerate action here. And I think that's the feeling going into COP, is that people want an acceleration of action coming out of this. And financial centers will play a critical role in driving that. We're talking about upskilling within our own workforce, for instance, so that we can actually drive not just action, but results, because people want results now. And that's going to be increasingly where the pressure is going to be, not on announcements, on results going forward. And so we're going to need that talent pool within financial services to help drive that. But I think the other role of financial centers and the sector more broadly is to go out and educate clients, educate other sectors on what they need to do and how can we help you fund that. Obviously, it's about capital. We're going to need to get capital to the right places within our economies to transition successfully. And it won't just be about driving capital to renewables and things like that. It is going to be about transitioning, the really tough parts of our economies. Every country is a little bit different, but we all have those really tough areas we're going to have to transition, and they're going to need capital. So it's about not only driving, the talent development within our own sector, but then moving that out into the economy through sectors. And I'll also mention, not just in big firms, pushing it, small, medium-sized enterprises make up a big proportion, certainly of the economy in Canada, and they do in many, many other economies. So how are we going to help as financial centers and financial services professionals and industry to drive change there too? Because we won't be able to meet our goals without moving the dial on the small and medium-sized enterprises as well. So, I think I'd sort of sum it up that there is this pent up sort of desire for action and for results. And I think you're going to see that in COP and coming out of COP, that demand for results in the years ahead.
And I remember yesterday, thank you, Jennifer, used the phrase time for action, which really resonated with me. Joe, just building on what Jennifer just said there, in terms of working with clients and building the awareness, in terms of your role as a leader in BNY Mellon at a global level, how much of your time is focused on that, or maybe as the firm? Is that something that you're working on a deep level with clients?
So I would say there's no longer an awareness challenge, Stephen, because the topic has been with us in so many ways to date. What the conversations are turning to now is the state of readiness of all of us who participate in an industry. And a number of financial services firms and global banks have been operating their own activities in a carbon neutral way for quite some time now, but they're starting to understand that they've got to look through their entire supply chain to see what more needs to be done. So in the same way that we've looked at compliance officers and their future role, we could have started an educational program in Ireland looking at many different types of roles in organizations. We could have started with procurement teams, for example, because they're going to have to be more skilled at understanding a procurement challenge with a net zero motivation. We could have looked at risk management practices across member firms, because as everyone transitions to a completely different way of operating, they're going to transition from old established procedures to new procedures, and the risk is going to be a key deliverable along the way, and being risk aware and being able to plot your way through a transition is going to be particularly difficult. We could have looked at financial reporting teams, because most of the disclosures that we're talking that we talk about and that get recognized under SFDR find their way into annual and semi-annual and quarterly announcements and releases that financial firms, typically larger ones, have to complete. We could have looked at treasury teams and teams that are involved in balance sheet management to see whether they had the necessary skills for a different future. Product teams that create all different types of financial product. How far are they on their journey around creating sustainable product? And where most people start is in that basic around facilities management, and perhaps that's the easier place to start. But the conversations now have gone from that easy place to the much more difficult challenges that lie ahead. Especially around looking end to end from where you start your purchase to where you deliver your final product, and every point of contact with a community, with a global audience that your firm embraces. So these are the sorts of directions that conversations are going, and how prepared are we all? And do we all need to do more individually and collectively? And how do we equip our employees and employees of the future, and our future talent and our existing talent, to help get us on that journey that we all need to be on? So while we started with compliance officers, we could have started in very many places, and hopefully we'll kick into some of those other places next. But that's where the conversations tend to head, Stephen, and that's a bit of sentiment for how they go.
Great. Thank you, Joe. And I think there, Tracy, that was a kind of a real statement of intent. And I think the Yvonne, the Sustainable Finance Skill Net, we launched a report shortly during COP. And I think it looked at 47 different roles. And Joe was good enough to bring us through a few of them. But there is demand, as Jennifer said, not just in Toronto, but also in Ireland. Sandra, we're going to be closing in 3 minutes. Just if I go to you quickly, you kind of said earlier on how you're now assisting your own clients. Does what Jennifer and Joe just say resonate with you? And is that what you're actually doing in terms of walking the walk?
Yeah, yes, it is. Absolutely. I think in terms of working with clients, I think I personally feel very passionate about helping our clients make informed decisions. And I think just like we're navigating this landscape, so too are they. I feel it's our responsibility to support them, enable them on that journey. And I suppose it's also about building a partnership with your clients. We're all on different stages of journeys. We'll all be making different decisions at different points in time. For us, it's about ensuring that we can be that partner to our clients, and that we can be that source of, I suppose, knowledge, guidance, in terms of both the challenges and the opportunities in terms of navigating the sustainability landscape, but also providing those solutions. And to Joe's point, and I fully echo Joe's observations, every single team is impacted by this. There's a full value chain from both the individuals who work with the clients to the fund managers who manage assets to our client reporting, etc. So I do believe that in terms of achieving the macro ambition of building a more sustainable economy, all teams need to be upskilled in their own unique way, relevant to both understanding the macro context, but also how it pertains to their particular role. And I think really importantly, it's about how their role connects to that macro purpose and has that impact. And when I think of impact, and I fully echo Fiona's comments, we do need to talk about impact. This the impact that we have had in relation to our book of business is one aspect, but the multiplier impact of extending that into the Irish market, extending that into the global market, if every single firm can have an impact, then the multiplier impact in terms of achieving that higher order ambition is very much there, and the power is there. But the people are key to this. Talent, innovation, leadership, and mobilizing and energizing your teams will be the key to success in this.
Great, thank you, Sandra. So I'm going to bring this session to an end now in a moment, and it's been fascinating. And for me, who's does this every day of the week, I've learned a lot in this session. And I think the key thing there, just to unpack a few things, Emer spoke earlier on about the piece of work which underpinned the development of the Irish Roadmap. And Jennifer, you'd be pleased to know that was the FC4S assessment tool, which was used by a state to develop their roadmap, as you know, launched this week. SFDR, Joe, as you mentioned, January next year, the next version. And so Sustainable Finance SkillNet in the next few weeks will be rolling out a SFDR course for our Irish located participants. Compliance, absolutely fantastic, really, really thrilled with that. And I think, Joe, what that shows is, FSI under Paul Sweetman's leadership, your support as the sustainability lead at the board there, working with Raheem, Yvonne, and obviously IFS SkillNet, being able to go, Tracy, to you as SkillNet Ireland, and with the compliance officers, as Joe said, as an association representing over 3,000 people, was just hugely impactful. So, Tracy, if I could just maybe turn to you, and I'll put you under the pressure to close us out. The roadmap launched this Monday. If we're here next week, if next year, if AIB is willing to support next year, and hope they do. Correct. But if we're here in 12 months' time, what would you like to see in the progress of the roadmap, please?
Well, what I'd like to see is that the delivery of your ambition and the development of those programmes and new programmes that have yet to emerge, that partnership of everyone working together. Talent for the climate action is one of our key strategic positions in SkillNet Ireland. As you know, with yourselves and with other industry bodies, we're working towards that. And a big part of that is as others have said, bringing it out to all companies, smaller companies. I think the work that you can do in helping smaller companies as well as financial services centre companies will really make a difference.
Great. Yvonne, that resonate with you?
Well, yes, absolutely. Lots to be done, and it's very exciting in terms of the roadmap and what's been set out. So look forward to it.
Look, I ran a little bit over time there, but I was excited about the chat we were having. So I want to thank Jennifer in Toronto, Emer, Tracy, Yvonne, Sandra, and of course Joe. Really appreciate the time. I hope you have a great remainder of the day. And Jennifer, you're only starting, and Emer, we hope you get better soon as well. So thanks to everybody, and really appreciate your time. Thank you.